She only asked for one night beneath a roof, worn down by the road and running low on hope. But when he saw how his boys looked at her and how she looked back, mercy turned to something lasting, and a home quietly began to rebuild itself. The thunder rolls across the Wyoming prairie like cannon fire, each crack splitting the darkening sky, as if God himself is tearing the heavens apart. Clint Rourke stands at his kitchen window, watching the storm approach his ranch with the kind of intensity that makes seasoned frontiersmen nervous. Lightning illuminates the endless grassland in stark, ghostly flashes, revealing a landscape that seems to hold its breath before the deluge. Inside the modest ranch house, his two sons huddle near the fireplace. 8-year-old Tommy clutches a wooden horse their mother carved before she died, while 12-year-old Garrett pretends to read, but keeps glancing toward the window where his father stands silhouetted against the storm. The boys have learned to read their father's moods like weather patterns, and tonight something feels different, heavier than just the approaching rain. Clint runs a weathered hand through his dark hair, premature silver threading through at the temples. 3 years since Lydia passed, and he still finds himself looking toward the door, expecting her gentle voice to call the boys in for supper. The silence in their home has become a fourth member of the family, unwelcome but permanent, filling the spaces where laughter used to live. The first drops of rain begin pelting the windows. When they hear it, a soft, desperate knocking at the front door. Not the confident rap of a neighbor or the official pounding of law enforcement, but the tentative tap of someone who's not sure they deserve shelter but needs it desperately. Clint opens the door to find a woman standing in the growing storm, soaked to the bone and swaying on her feet like a tree about to fall. Her dark hair hangs in wet tendrils around a face that's pale with exhaustion, and her clothes, what's left of them, tell the story of someone who's been traveling hard and long. She can't be more than 25, but her eyes hold the kind of weariness that usually takes decades to accumulate. "Please," she whispers, her voice barely audible above the thunder. "I just need a place to sleep for the night. I won't cause trouble, I promise. I'll be gone before dawn." Clint hesitates, his protective instincts warring with something deeper, a recognition of desperation that mirrors his own, though hers is written in mud and rain, while his is carved in silence and lonely nights. Behind him, he can feel his sons watching, waiting to see what their father will do. The smart thing would be to send her to town, to the boarding house where strangers belong. But something in her eyes stops him cold, not danger, but defeat. The kind of bone-deep exhaustion that comes from running so long you've forgotten what you're running toward, only what you're running from. Without a word, Clint steps aside and points toward the hallway that leads to the back of the house. To the room that's remained closed for 3 years, the one with Lydia's things still folded in the dresser and her favorite quilt still spread across the bed. The room he swore he'd never open again. "Thank you," the woman whispers, and disappears down the dark hallway like a ghost seeking rest. If you thought these were crazy, you won't want to miss what happens in this next video. Dawn breaks gentle and golden over the ranch, washing away the fury of the previous night's storm like it never happened. The prairie stretches endlessly in all directions, dotted with wildflowers that seem to have bloomed overnight, as if the rain awakened something beautiful that had been sleeping in the earth. Clint rises before the sun, as he has every day for 20 years of ranching life. His morning routine is sacred and solitary coffee, black as midnight, eggs fried in the cast-iron pan Lydia brought from her mother's kitchen, and a few minutes of silence on the front porch, watching the world wake up. But this morning, something feels different. The house holds an unfamiliar energy, a presence that's both foreign and oddly comforting. The woman, he realizes he doesn't even know her name, moves through the kitchen like she's trying not to disturb the very air around her. She's cleaned herself up as best she can, her dark hair braided back and her clothes, though still worn, now neat and proper. In the morning light, Clint can see she's younger than he initially thought, with the kind of quiet beauty that doesn't announce itself but grows on you like sunrise. I should go, she says softly when she notices him watching. I've imposed long enough. But before Clint can respond, Tommy appears in the doorway, rubbing sleep from his eyes and carrying his wooden horse. The boy stops short when he sees the stranger, his 8-year-old mind processing this unexpected development with the straightforward curiosity that only children possess. Who are you? Tommy asks, not rudely but with genuine interest. I'm Maeve, she says, kneeling down to his level, with a gentleness that makes Clint's chest tighten unexpectedly. Maeve Callan. I stayed here last night because of the storm. Tommy considers this information with the seriousness of a judge weighing evidence. Are you hungry? Papa makes good eggs, but they're better when they don't burn. A smile tugs at the corner of Maeve's mouth, the first real expression Clint has seen from her. I suppose I could eat something. Garrett joins them in the kitchen, 12 years old, and already showing signs of the man he'll become. He's more cautious than his younger brother, studying Maeve with eyes that have learned to be suspicious of changes in their carefully ordered world. But when she asks him about the book tucked under his arm, something in his defensive posture softens. It's about explorers, Garrett says, holding up the worn volume. Men who discovered new places and had adventures. I've done some exploring myself, Maeve says, accepting the cup of coffee Clint offers her, though I'm not sure all of it qualifies as adventure. As they sit around the kitchen table, the first time in 3 years that it's held more than 3 people, Clint watches his sons interact with this stranger. Tommy chatters about his wooden horse and the new colt in the pasture, while Garrett shares stories from his book with the kind of enthusiasm he usually reserves for his father alone. Maeve listens to both boys with genuine attention, asking questions that show she's really hearing them, not just waiting for her turn to speak. When Tommy spills milk across the table, she cleans it up without fuss or scolding. When Garrett stumbles over a difficult word, she helps him sound it out without making him feel stupid. I should help with chores, Maeve says as breakfast winds down. As thanks for the shelter. Just for today. Then I'll be on my way. Clint nods, though something in him rebels against the idea of her leaving so soon. Appreciate it, he says simply. As Maeve begins clearing dishes with practiced efficiency, Clint notices how naturally she moves in the kitchen, how his son's eyes follow her with something that looks dangerously like hope. And for the first time in 3 years, their house doesn't feel quite so empty. That evening, after the chores are done and the boys are settled with their books, Clint finds himself standing in the hallway outside Lydia's room. The door is slightly ajar, not closed tight as it has been for 3 years, but not fully open either. Through the gap, he can hear the soft sounds of someone moving carefully, respectfully, through space that holds ghosts. The decision to offer her this room still puzzles him. He has a perfectly good spare room downstairs, one that doesn't carry the weight of memory and loss. But something about the way Maeve had stood in his doorway, soaked and desperate, had bypassed his rational mind and spoken directly to some deeper part of him that recognized a fellow soul carrying unbearable burdens. Lydia's room, his sanctuary and his torment, preserved exactly as she'd left it the morning she'd kissed him goodbye and ridden to town for supplies the last time he'd ever see her alive. The yellow dress she'd planned to wear to Sunday service still hangs in the wardrobe. Her brush and mirror set, wedding gift from her grandmother, still sits on the vanity. Even her Bible remains open to the page she'd been reading, a pressed wildflower marking her place in Psalms. For 3 years, he'd kept that door locked, unable to face the reminders of everything he'd lost. The boys had learned not to ask about it, had stopped suggesting they turn it into a playroom or storage space. It had become a shrine to grief, a monument to the woman who'd brought light and laughter into their lives, and then left them stumbling in the dark. Now a stranger sleeps in his dead wife's bed, and instead of the rage he'd expected to feel, Clint is surprised by something else entirely. Not peace, exactly, but perhaps the first stirring of it, like the moment just before dawn, when the darkness begins to soften around the edges. He hears one of the boys crying, Tommy, probably, who still has nightmares about the day they found Mama's horse wandering riderless near Miller's Creek. Usually, Clint would go to his son, would sit on the edge of the bed and stroke the boy's hair until the tears stopped and sleep returned. But tonight, he hears a different voice offering comfort. Shh, sweetheart. Maeve's voice drifts through the thin walls, soft as a lullaby. You're safe. Whatever you're dreaming about, it can't hurt you here. Clint moves closer to Tommy's door, listening to the gentle murmur of conversation, as Maeve soothes his son back to sleep. Her voice carries the kind of natural maternal warmth that can't be faked, the instinctive knowledge of how to ease a child's fears without dismissing them as foolish. Will you sing? Tommy asks, his voice small and vulnerable in the darkness. I don't know many songs, Maeve admits. But then she begins to hum something low and sweet, a melody that seems to wrap around the house like a blanket. It's nothing Clint recognizes, but it's beautiful in its simplicity, soothing in its genuine care. As the humming continues, Clint realizes he's hearing something that's been missing from their home for 3 years. The sound of a woman's voice offering comfort in the dark hours. The quiet strength that mothers bring to moments when the world feels too big and scary for small boys to handle alone. He turns away from Tommy's door, his heart heavy with emotions he can't quite name. Gratitude, certainly, for this stranger's kindness to his sons. But something deeper too. Something that feels dangerously like the first crack in the wall he's built around his heart. Back in his own room, Clint lies awake listening to the house settle around them. For the first time in 3 years, it doesn't feel quite so empty, quite so full of echoes and regrets. And despite everything rational telling him that tomorrow this woman will disappear from their lives as suddenly as she'd appeared, part of him hopes she won't. Morning brings the kind of perfect spring day that makes the hardships of frontier life seem almost worthwhile. The air is clean and sweet, washed by the previous night's rain, and the endless Wyoming sky stretches blue and cloudless from horizon to horizon. It's the kind of day that Lydia would have called a gift from God, and Clint finds himself thinking of her with less pain than usual. Maeve proves herself as capable as she is quiet, moving through the morning chores with an efficiency that speaks of hard experience. She mends a shirt that Garrett tore on a fence post, her stitches small and even as she works by the kitchen window. She bakes bread in Lydia's old Dutch oven, filling the house with a smell that makes the boys hover hopefully in the doorway. When Clint mentions a loose post in the south pasture fence, Maeve surprises him by asking for a hammer and wire. She works alongside him under the warming sun, her hands steady and sure, as she helps repair the break. Her movements speak of someone who's done manual labor before, someone who's learned that survival sometimes depends on being useful. You know your way around a ranch, Clint observes as they work. Maeve's hands still for just a moment. I've lived on farms before. You learn to make yourself helpful. There's something in her tone that discourages further questions. But Garrett, following them around with his usual 12-year-old curiosity, isn't as easily deterred. Where did you come from? He asks as they walk back toward the house. Before here, I mean. Do you have family somewhere? Maeve stops walking, her face going carefully blank in a way that reminds Clint of his own tendency to retreat behind silence when topics become too painful. I've been traveling for a while, she says carefully. Sometimes it's better to keep moving than to stay in one place too long. Why? Garrett persists. And Clint can see the exact moment when the boy's natural inquisitiveness bumps up against adult pain that he's too young to understand. Some roads are harder to walk than others, Maeve says gently. And sometimes you have to leave one place to find another where you belong. That afternoon, while the boys are occupied with their studies, Clint finds himself watching Maeve as she works in the kitchen. There's a sadness about her that goes deeper than simple exhaustion, a wariness that suggests she's learned to expect the worst from people and situations. When a shadow passes by the window, just Tommy chasing chickens, she flinches instinctively before catching herself. "How long since you've had a real home?" Clint asks quietly. Maeve's hands pause in their kneading of tomorrow's bread. "I'm not sure I know what that means anymore," she says finally. "A place where you're safe, where people are glad to see you come home at the end of the day. It's been a long time. What are you running from?" The question hangs in the air between them, and for a moment Clint thinks she won't answer. Her knuckles are white where she grips the counter, and he can see the internal battle playing out across her features. "A life that nearly killed me," she says finally. "Mistakes I can't undo. Choices that led me down a path I never meant to walk. Sometimes the only way to save yourself is to walk away from everything you've ever known." Before Clint can respond, Tommy bursts through the kitchen door, covered in mud and grinning with 8-year-old joy. "Maeve, come see the new puppies. Old Belle had them in the barn, and they're the sweetest things you ever saw." Maeve's transformation is instant and genuine, the shadows lifting from her face as she smiles at the boys' enthusiasm. "Puppies? Well, that's certainly worth getting muddy for." As she follows Tommy outside, Clint realizes that whatever Maeve is running from, whatever pain she carries, she hasn't let it poison her capacity for kindness. And watching his sons respond to her gentle attention, he begins to wonder if maybe they can offer her something she needs as much as she's already given them. Sheriff Ben Dalton arrives at the Rourke Ranch on a Tuesday afternoon, his bay gelding kicking up dust as he rides toward the house. Clint sees him coming from the pasture, and something cold settles in his stomach. Ben's not the type to make social calls. Maeve, hanging laundry behind the house, freezes when she spots the rider. Her entire body goes rigid as she positions herself behind the flapping sheets. Her reaction sends alarm bells ringing in Clint's mind. Innocent people don't hide from sheriffs. "Afternoon, Clint," Ben says, dismounting near the porch. His sharp eyes take in everything. The mended fence, the smell of baking bread, the woman partially concealed by laundry. "Ben," Clint responds casually, "what brings you out this way?" "Got word there's a woman staying here. Stranger. Arrived during that storm. Just want to make sure everything's on the up and up." Clint's jaw tightens. "She needed shelter. Seemed like the Christian thing to do." "I'm sure it was," Ben agrees. "Still, I'd like to speak with her. Make sure she's here of her own free will." Maeve appears around the corner, her movements careful despite the obvious fear in her eyes. She's composed herself, but Clint can see the tension in her shoulders. "You wanted to speak with me, Sheriff?" Ben touches his hat politely. "Yes, ma'am. Just routine questions. May I ask your name?" "Maeve Callan." "And where are you traveling from, Miss Callan?" "East," she says simply. "Planning to stay in the area long?" "I haven't decided yet." "Any family somewhere expecting you?" "No family. No one expecting me anywhere." Ben asks a few more standard questions. Clint watches Maeve grow more tense with each query, fighting not to fidget. When Ben finally mounts his horse to leave, she seems to sag with relief. After the sheriff disappears, Maeve sinks onto the porch steps, her hands shaking. "He'll be back," she says finally. "They always come back, asking more questions. I should leave tonight, before I bring trouble to your family." "What kind of trouble?" Clint asks gently. Maeve looks at him with eyes full of old pain. "The kind that follows women like me wherever we go. The kind that ruins good people who make the mistake of helping." Clint studies her face, seeing not a criminal, but a woman who's learned to expect the worst from life. "If there's danger coming to my sons because you're here, I need to understand what we're facing." She meets his eyes with painful honesty. "Not the kind of danger you're thinking. No law broken, no crimes committed. Just a woman who finally found the courage to leave a bad situation, and the people who don't want to let her go. Then we'll deal with it, Clint says with conviction. But you're not running anymore. The evening storm comes without warning, rolling across the prairie like a dark blanket thrown over the world. The wind picks up first, bending the grass in silver waves and rattling the windows of the ranch house. Then the lightning begins, sharp and brilliant against the purple-black sky, followed by thunder that seems to shake the very foundations of the earth. Inside the house, the sudden power of the storm knocks out their small electrical system, plunging them into darkness just as Maeve is putting dinner on the table. But instead of cursing the inconvenience as he usually would, Clint finds himself lighting the old oil lamps, their warm golden glow transforming the kitchen into something almost magical. "It's like camping," Tommy announces with 8-year-old delight, his face animated in the flickering light. "Except we're inside, and there's still real food." Garrett, trying to maintain his 12-year-old dignity, nonetheless seems enchanted by the novelty of eating by lamplight. He tells stories about explorers dining by torchlight in unknown lands, his imagination sparked by the unusual circumstances. Maeve serves the simple meal she's prepared: beef stew with vegetables from their garden, fresh bread still warm from the oven, and canned peaches for dessert. Nothing fancy, but everything prepared with care that makes it taste like a feast. As they eat, Clint realizes this is the first time in 3 years that he's heard genuine laughter echo through these rooms. "Maeve, will you tell us about your exploring?" Tommy asks around a mouthful of bread. "The places you've been?" Maeve hesitates, weighing how much truth to share with children who've known mostly safety. "I've seen some beautiful country," she says finally. "Mountains that touch the clouds, rivers so clear you can see the fish swimming, prairies that stretch so far they seem to go on forever." As the conversation continues, Clint finds himself really watching his sons, not just checking that they're fed and safe, but seeing them as the individuals they're becoming. Tommy, with his open heart and boundless curiosity. Garrett, standing on the threshold between childhood and young manhood, hungry for knowledge about the wider world. And he sees how they respond to Maeve's presence, how she genuinely listens to them, treats their thoughts as worthy of attention, includes them in conversation with natural warmth. "There's something I want to say," Clint announces as they finish dessert, his voice carrying weight that makes both boys look up attentively. "Maeve, you've been eating in the kitchen since you arrived, taking your meals after the rest of us are finished. That's not how we do things in this family." He reaches over and pulls out the chair beside him, Lydia's chair, which has sat empty for 3 years. "This is your place," he says simply. "For as long as you're here, this is where you belong." Maeve stares at the chair as if it might disappear, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "You're family now, aren't you?" Tommy asks with characteristic directness. Maeve slides into the chair beside Clint, and for the first time since she arrived, she allows herself to cry not from fear, but from something that might actually be hope. The stranger rides into Cedar Ridge on a Thursday morning, his presence immediately notable in a town where everyone knows everyone else's business. He's tall and lean, with angular features that might be handsome if they weren't set in lines of perpetual anger. His clothes are well-made but travel-worn, and he rides his horse with the careless authority of someone accustomed to taking what he wants. At Murphy's General Store, he asks casual questions about ranches in the area, particularly any that might be housing strangers or recent arrivals. His manner is polite enough, but there's something underneath a coiled tension that makes the shopkeeper nervous. "Looking for someone," the stranger explains, his voice carrying a slight southern accent. "My wife. She's been unwell lately, prone to wandering off when she gets confused. Family's worried sick about her." The story sounds reasonable enough, but something about the man's eyes, cold and calculating, despite his concerned tone, makes the shopkeeper reluctant to offer too much information. Sheriff Dalton encounters the stranger at the saloon later that day, and the conversation plants seeds of unease. The man introduces himself as Marcus Callan, claims to be searching for his missing wife who's been suffering from female hysteria and delusions that have made her dangerous to herself and others. She's convinced herself that I've been unkind to her, Marcus explains, his voice heavy with manufactured sadness. The doctor back home said, it's common in women of a certain age. They create elaborate fantasies to justify their irrational behavior. Poor thing probably doesn't even remember who she really is anymore. But Ben Dalton has been a lawman for 15 years, and he's developed a sixth sense about people who aren't telling the whole truth. Something about Marcus Callan's story doesn't sit right, too smooth, too convenient, too carefully crafted to explain away any accusations his wife might make. That evening, Ben rides out to the Rourke Ranch, ostensibly for a social call but really to warn Clint about the stranger's inquiries. He finds the family gathered on the front porch, enjoying the cool evening air, and notices immediately how different things seem from his last visit. Maeve appears more relaxed, more integrated into the family dynamic. Clint, might I have a word? Ben asks, his tone carefully neutral but his eyes serious. They step away from the porch, out of earshot of the others, but Clint can see Maeve watching them with growing alarm. She knows, somehow, that this visit is connected to her presence here. Man came to town today, asking questions. Ben explains quietly, says he's looking for his wife, woman named Callan, who's been suffering from mental problems. Description matches your houseguest pretty closely. Clint feels something cold settle in his stomach. What kind of man? The kind that makes my skin crawl, Ben admits. All polite words and reasonable explanations, but there's something underneath that doesn't smell right. Claims she's dangerous to herself and others, needs to be brought home for proper medical care. From the porch comes the sound of a chair scraping against wood, and both men turn to see Maeve standing frozen beside the door, her face a mask of terror. She's heard enough to understand what's happening. How long before he finds this place? Clint asks. Day or two, maybe less. He's being systematic, checking every ranch and farm in the area. That night, after the boys are in bed, Clint finds Maeve sitting in the kitchen, staring out the window into the darkness. Tell me about him, Clint says simply. His name is Marcus Callan, and I was married to him for 6 years, she whispers. He'll tell anyone who'll listen that I'm mentally unstable. And legally, he's probably right. Wives don't have many rights when their husbands decide they're unfit. Was he? Did he hurt you? Every day. He has 100 ways to make you feel worthless. 1,000 methods of control that leave no visible marks. Clint reaches across the table and takes her hand. He can't have you back. I don't care what the law says. He can't have you. Marcus Callan arrives at the Rourke Ranch just after noon on Friday, riding up the dusty drive with the confidence of a man who's never been denied anything he's decided to take. He's cleaned himself up since his arrival in town, his clothes pressed and his manner carefully calibrated to project concerned authority rather than threat. Clint is waiting for him on the front porch, his rifle leaning casually against the railing, but within easy reach. The boys are inside, and Maeve stands behind him, her face pale but resolute. She's insisted on facing this confrontation rather than hiding. Mr. Rourke, I presume, Marcus says, dismounting with practiced ease. I'm Marcus Callan, and I believe you've been harboring my wife. I've come to take her home. Up close, Clint can see what Sheriff Dalton meant about this man making his skin crawl. Handsome in a cold way, with eyes that assess and calculate rather than truly see. His smile is practiced and empty. Your wife? Is she? Clint responds mildly. Funny thing, the woman I know never mentioned being married. Marcus's laugh is perfectly calibrated to suggest patient amusement. I'm afraid Maeve has been suffering from female hysteria. She's created elaborate fantasies about our marriage, convinced herself that I've mistreated her somehow. The doctor said it's quite common. Women often fabricate stories to justify abandoning their responsibilities. Maeve steps forward, and Clint can feel the tremendous courage it takes for her to face this man. My name is Maeve, and I left because staying was killing me. Now, darling, Marcus says, his tone dripping with condescending affection, you know that's not true. You've been confused lately, saying things that don't make sense. What condition? Maeve interrupts, steel in her voice now. The condition of being tired of being told I'm crazy when I'm not? The condition of being sick of being locked in rooms when I disagree with you? Marcus's mask slips, revealing something ugly underneath. You're clearly having another episode. These people have been kind to shelter you, but you need proper medical care. He steps toward her, but Clint moves between them, his hand resting on the rifle stock. She said no. Clint states simply, that's all the answer you need. This is between a husband and wife, Marcus says, his voice hardening. You have no legal right to interfere. Maybe not, Clint agrees, raising his rifle. But I have the right to protect people on my property. The standoff stretches taut between them. From inside, Clint can hear the boys whispering, watching despite his orders. You're making a mistake, rancher, Marcus says, his civility finally slipping. I know people, have connections. I can make life very difficult for you. But as he swings into his saddle, Tommy calls from the doorway, Papa, that's the man who hurt the horses in town yesterday. Marcus's face goes red with fury at being called out by a child. Get off my land, Clint says quietly, and don't come back. Marcus spurs his horse viciously and rides off, turning back once to snarl, This isn't over. As the hoofbeats fade, Maeve sags against the porch railing, but there's determination in her posture now. Whatever comes next, she tells the family, we'll face it together. 2 weeks pass, in uneasy quiet, after Marcus's confrontation at the ranch. Sheriff Dalton reports that Marcus has left town, but the relief is tempered by uncertainty about whether he's truly gone or simply regrouping. Despite the lingering tension, something fundamental has changed. The crisis has stripped away the last pretenses that this arrangement is temporary. Maeve helps with the spring planting, teaches Tommy his letters in the evenings, and listens to Garrett's dreams of adventure. Most remarkably, despite Marcus's threats, she begins to laugh again, genuine joy that transforms the house in ways Clint hadn't realized they needed. One evening, as they sit on the front porch watching the sunset, Tommy makes the observation that changes everything. Maeve, he says with 8-year-old directness, why don't you have the same name as us? If you're family, shouldn't you be Maeve Rourke? The question hangs in the cooling air, and Clint feels his heart do something complicated in his chest. He hadn't planned this moment, hadn't scripted the words that suddenly seem so necessary to speak. Tommy's right, Clint says quietly, his eyes on the distant horizon. If you're going to stay, really stay, then maybe it's time to make it official. Maeve goes very still beside him. What are you saying? Clint turns to meet her eyes. I'm saying that what we have here isn't just convenience anymore. It's become something real, something worth protecting and building on. He takes a breath, feeling like he's standing on the edge of a cliff. I'm saying that if you'll have us, all of us, then maybe it's time to stop pretending this is temporary. Garrett, who's been listening intently, suddenly grins. Papa's asking you to marry him. He's just being all roundabout about it like grown-ups do. The laughter that escapes Maeve is part joy, part tears, part relief. Is that what you're doing, Clint Rourke? I reckon I am, Clint admits, heat rising in his cheeks. I know it's not the most romantic proposal, but you've brought life back to this house, love back to my sons, and something I thought I'd lost forever back to my own heart. He reaches for her hand. I'm asking if you'd be willing to build something permanent with us, not because you need protection, but because we've become family in all the ways that matter. The room I sleep in belonged to your first wife, Maeve says quietly. It belonged to Lydia? Clint corrects gently. But she's gone, and you're here. This isn't about replacing what was lost. It's about building something new with what we've found. Tommy climbs into Maeve's lap. Will you be our mama? For real and always? The tears come, then tears of homecoming. Of finally believing that good things can happen to broken people. Yes, she whispers, holding Tommy close while reaching for Garrett's hand. For real and always. Maeve Rourke, Tommy says, trying out the name. I like how that sounds. So do I, Maeve agrees, her voice strong and sure. So do I. If you thought these were crazy, you won't want to miss what happens in this next video.